The town of Dry Creek sat like a weathered bone under the merciless August sun of 1880. Dust devils danced down Main Street, swirling past the cracked storefronts and leaning saloons that lined the road like broken teeth. The air hung thick and still, so dry it felt like it could suck the moisture out of a man's lungs with every breath. Horses stood tied to hitching posts, heads low, tails swishing lazily at the persistent flies. Jack Thornton guided his bay, gelding down the center of the street, his hat pulled low against the glare. His spurs clinked softly with each step the horse took, that lonely sound echoing like a reminder of how separate he was from everyone around him. He was a tall man, lean and hard from years beneath an unforgiving sun. Rope scars marked his hands, and the deep lines on his face told a story of silence and survival. The townspeople knew him well enough to move aside when he passed. Women gathered their baskets closer, hurrying their children out of his path. Men gave short nods from beneath their awnings, their eyes following him with a mixture of respect and unease. Jack Thornton was not a man who invited conversation, and that suited everyone just fine. "There he goes again," Martha Henderson whispered to her companion as she stood in the doorway of the general store. "Every Saturday like clockwork. Rides in for supplies, speaks to no one, and rides right back out again." "Cold as a winter grave, that one," Agnes replied, fanning herself with a folded scrap of paper. "Been here near 5 years now, and I don't recall him ever tipping his hat to a lady or sharing a drink with the men. They say he lost his whole family back in Kansas, Indian raid, or maybe outlaws. Nobody knows for sure. Whatever it was, it turned his heart to stone." Martha followed Jack's slow progress down the street. "Look at him. Doesn't even notice poor Sarah Mills standing there, all dolled up and waiting for him to glance her way." Indeed, Jack rode past the milliner's shop where Sarah stood arranging bonnets in the window, her golden curls catching the light. She looked up hopefully, but Jack's gaze stayed fixed straight ahead as if he were riding towards some horizon only he could see. The afternoon heat pressed down on Dry Creek like a heavy iron. Jack dismounted outside the mercantile, looping his reins around the post with calm precision. His movements were economical, practiced, those of a man who never wasted effort. Inside, Sam Polson looked up from behind the counter. "Afternoon, Jack. Got your usual order ready?" Jack nodded once, wordless as always, and set a few coins on the counter. Flour, coffee, tobacco, a box of ammunition. His purchases never changed. He packed his saddlebag and stepped back into the blazing sunlight. That was when the stagecoach arrived. Its wheels clattered to a halt at the far end of the street, throwing up clouds of dust that shimmered in the heat. People drifted out of shops and porches to see who might be arriving. New faces were rare in Dry Creek, and any stranger was worth a look. Among the passengers, a woman stepped down. Her traveling dress had seen better days, the fabric faded and dusty, but she moved with quiet dignity. Her back was straight, her chin lifted, and though exhaustion shadowed her face, there was something unbroken in the way she stood. She retrieved a small carpet bag from the driver and turned to face the street. The wind lifted the edge of her bonnet, revealing dark hair pinned neatly beneath it and a face both strong and gentle. Her eyes, gray as a storm cloud rolling across the plains, swept over the curious crowd without fear or apology. Jack had just mounted his horse again when something, maybe the sudden hush that fell over the street, made him look up, his hands stilled on the reins. For the first time in 5 long years, something in him shifted. Those gray eyes met his, and the noise of the town faded until there was only the creak of the saddle and the sound of the wind. She didn't look away right off, and neither did he. There was something in her gaze that spoke to the quiet, broken corners of his soul, something familiar, like grief recognizing its reflection. Then she turned, gathering her carpetbag and walking toward the Dry Creek Hotel, her steps steady, though she carried a faint limp. Jack sat frozen in the saddle, watching her disappear through the hotel door. Conversations around him started up again, whispers rolling through the crowd like wind through dry grass. "Well, I'll be," Sam Polson muttered from his doorway. "Never thought I'd see the day Jack Thornton stopped for anyone. The woman's name, though no one knew it yet, was Eleanor Bright, late of Kansas City and burdened with her own share of ghosts. Jack rode out of town minutes later, but the image of those gray eyes followed him all the way back to his lonely ranch. That night, as he sat on his porch with the desert wind sighing through the sagebrush, he found himself thinking about her again, wondering who she was. What had brought her to this forgotten place? And for the first time in years, he caught himself wondering what tomorrow might bring. In the room above the hotel's creaking stairs, Eleanor sat on the edge of a narrow bed, hands trembling from exhaustion. The small window rattled in its frame as the evening wind picked up, carrying the scent of sand and distant rain. She had made it this far, farther than she'd dared hope. Whatever waited for her here, judgment, kindness, or the cruel indifference of another empty town, she would face it as she always had. Head high, secrets kept close, and no tears left to waste. Neither she nor Jack Thornton could have known that their brief glance on that dusty street would set into motion a story that would change both their lives. But the desert remembers everything, and Dry Creek had been waiting a long time for something to stir its dust again. The nightmares came for Jack Thornton, as they always did. In the dark hours before dawn, he saw their faces again, Mary's gentle smile, little Thomas's laugh, baby Sarah's sleeping face. Then came the fire, the screams, and the roar of hooves fading into the Kansas night. He woke with a strangled cry, drenched in sweat, the smell of smoke still clinging to his memory. 5 years. 5 years since the night everything he loved had been stolen. The law never found the raiders, and the world had moved on. Only Jack had not. He'd buried his family with his own hands and buried the man he used to be right beside them. Dry Creek had been his refuge, a place quiet enough for a broken man to fade into. But that morning, as he saddled his horse and rode out to mend fences, his thoughts were not on cattle or fences or survival. They kept returning to a woman with gray eyes and a proud tilt to her chin. He cursed himself under his breath and tried to focus on the work ahead. Yet no matter how hard he tried, she lingered like the smell of rain after a long drought. In town, Eleanor Bright was fighting her own battle. The Dry Creek Hotel was barely fit for habitation, thin walls, a sagging bed, and meals that were more imagination than substance. Her money was nearly gone. She'd counted the coins twice that morning, enough for 2 nights more if she was careful. She needed work, any work, before hunger forced her into choices she'd spent her life avoiding. By mid-morning, she had already visited the general store, the boarding house, and the small schoolhouse. Each had turned her away with polite words and averted eyes. No positions open, no need for help just now. Sorry, ma'am, can't take on anyone without references. The sun was high when she stopped outside the Brass Bell Saloon, staring at the swinging doors and the laughter spilling from within. Respectable women didn't work in saloons, but respectability didn't fill an empty stomach. "You lost, miss?" Eleanor turned. A woman stood in the alley beside the saloon, middle-aged with henna-red hair and sharp, watchful eyes. "I'm looking for work," Eleanor said, too tired for pretense. The woman studied her a long moment, then nodded toward the back door. "Name's Ruby. Come on then. Jake's the owner. If you can keep your head down and your wits sharp, he might find something for you." Inside, the saloon was a haze of tobacco smoke and spilled whiskey. Ruby led her to a heavy-set man behind the bar. His face was scarred, his eyes cold and calculating. "New girl, huh?" Jake asked, looking Eleanor up and down. "You ever worked in a place like this before?" "No," she admitted, her voice steady. "But I can serve drinks, clean tables, whatever's needed." He grunted. "You're polite, that's rare. All right, you can start tonight, 6 sharp. Ruby'll show you the ropes. And lady," his voice dropped, "you cause trouble, you're out. Understand?" Eleanor nodded. It wasn't dignity, but it was survival. When evening came, the Brass Bell filled with the usual crowd, ranch hands, drifters, and men too tired or lonely to go home. Eleanor worked quietly, carrying trays of beer and whiskey, staying out of reach of wandering hands and avoiding the card tables where tempers flared quickest. She was halfway through her shift when trouble found her anyway. 3 men swaggered in, already drunk and spoiling for attention. Their leader, a man with a pockmarked face and yellow teeth, spotted her at once. "Well, what do we have here?" he slurred. "Fresh face in town?" Eleanor forced a polite smile. "What can I get you gentlemen to drink?" He grabbed her wrist. "How about you sit a while and keep me company instead?" The room went still. The laughter faded. "Please let go," she said quietly, trying to pull free. "Come on now," he sneered, tightening his grip. "No harm in being friendly." His friends chuckled, the sound ugly and mean. Ruby took a step forward, but Jake stopped her with a shake of his head. "Let it play out," he muttered. "Best she learns quick who's who." The man yanked Eleanor closer, his breath sour with whiskey. "Smile, sweetheart." Then the batwing doors swung open. Jack Thornton stepped into the saloon. The air shifted immediately. Conversations died. The piano player's hands froze above the keys. Jack's eyes took in the scene in an instant. The frightened woman, the drunk holding her wrist, the crowd's uneasy stillness. Something cold and precise flickered behind his calm expression. He walked to the bar, his boots ringing against the floorboards. "Whiskey," he said. Jake poured it with shaking hands. Jack downed it in one swallow, set the glass down, and turned. "The lady asked you to let go," he said, his voice quiet, but cutting through the air like a knife. The drunk laughed. "Mind your own business, cowboy." Jack moved before the man could blink. His fist connected with the drunk's jaw with a crack like gunfire. The man went sprawling backward, crashing into a table. Eleanor stumbled free, clutching her wrist. The other 2 men rose, hands moving toward their guns. Jack's Colt was already out, steady and cold. "I wouldn't," he said evenly. For a long moment, nobody breathed. Then the men backed down, dragging their unconscious leader toward the door. When they were gone, the saloon exhaled all at once, noise and movement rushing back in. Jack holstered his gun and turned to Eleanor. "You hurt?" She shook her head, her pulse still racing. "No. Thank you, but I could have handled it." Something faintly amused flickered in his dark eyes. "I don't doubt it." "I don't need protecting," she added quickly, though her voice trembled. "I never said you did." He touched the brim of his hat and turned to leave. "But sometimes it doesn't hurt to have backup." He was gone before she could think of a reply. Ruby appeared beside her, grinning. "Well now, Jack Thornton, riding in like a knight in dusty armor. Didn't think I'd live to see the day." Eleanor forced a laugh, but her heart was still pounding. She had come west to escape men like her husband, men who used power to control. Yet here was another man, quiet, dangerous, unreadable, who'd stepped in when she needed him most. As she worked through the rest of her shift, she caught herself glancing toward the door more than once, half expecting him to return. Outside, Jack rode home through the darkness, cursing himself for getting involved. He'd sworn off caring, sworn off the pain that came with it. But her face, those eyes, haunted him like a melody he couldn't forget. And for the first time in 5 years, the loneliness felt heavier than the desert night around him. The desert wind carried a strange stillness that morning, as if the land itself were holding its breath. Eleanor Bright, now 3 weeks into her job at the Brass Bell Saloon, had grown used to the rough laughter and stale whiskey smell. But something about that day felt different, unsettled. Jack Thornton hadn't been back since the night he'd stepped in to defend her, yet she caught herself scanning the street each evening, wondering if she'd see him ride through town again. She told herself it didn't matter. He was just another man passing through, another reminder that kindness often came wrapped in danger. But deep down, she knew she was lying. That Friday, the saloon was busier than usual. Payday brought ranch hands from miles around, their pockets heavy and their manners light. Ruby and Eleanor worked side by side, balancing trays, pouring whiskey, dodging hands that reached too freely. Eleanor was just beginning to think she might survive another night when she heard the slurred drawl behind her. "Well, if it ain't the fine lady herself," said Bill Hawkins, a brute of a man who worked at the livery stable. "Didn't I tell you, boys?" She thinks she's too good for the likes of us." Quote. Eleanor turned slowly, tray balanced in her hands. "What can I get you, Mr. Hawkins?" "Your smile, sweetheart. Maybe a little company to go with it." His grin was wide and mean. "The only thing I'm selling here is whiskey," she said evenly, setting the glass on his table. "That'll be 2 bits." Hawkins laughed and caught her wrist. "Maybe I'm paying for more than that." The laughter around the room faded, replaced by a tense, watchful quiet. Ruby started forward, but stopped when Hawkins yanked Eleanor closer, his fingers digging into her arm. "Come on now," he said, voice low and ugly. "Don't play shy." Before Eleanor could speak, a chair smashed across Hawkins' shoulders. He crashed to the floor with a roar of pain. The entire saloon froze. Standing over him was Jack Thornton. "Seems I picked the right night to come back," he said calmly, tossing the broken chair aside. Hawkins staggered to his feet, blood dripping from his forehead. "You again!" he snarled. "You think you can keep meddling in my fun?" Jack didn't move, didn't even raise his voice. "I think you're going to walk away." "Or what?" Hawkins sneered, hand moving toward the knife at his belt. Jack's eyes went flat. "Or I'll put you down before you finish drawing that blade." Everyone knew it wasn't an empty threat. Hawkins hesitated, then spat blood on the floor. "This ain't over, Thornton." "Yeah," Jack said softly. "It is." Hawkins stumbled out, dragging his pride behind him. The moment he was gone, noise flooded back into the room. Relieved laughter, muttered curses, the piano picking up its tune again. Eleanor bent to gather the broken pieces of the chair. Jack crouched beside her, helping. "You've got a talent for finding trouble," he said. "Or maybe it finds me," she replied, her voice shaking. "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did," he interrupted. "Men like him only understand one language." Their fingers brushed as they reached for the same splintered leg. A spark passed between them, quick, unexpected, dangerous. Eleanor pulled back, her breath unsteady. "I can't keep depending on you to save me, Mr. Thornton." Quote. "Then maybe stop putting yourself in places that need saving," he said quietly. "Some of us don't have the luxury of hiding away on a ranch," she shot back, eyes flashing. "Some of us have to earn our bread however we can." Jack's jaw tightened. Fair enough. He stood, dusted his hands, and gave her a long look. "Just remember, not all battles are worth the scars they leave." He left without another word. But that night, when Eleanor closed the saloon and walked back to the hotel, the shadows felt heavier. Halfway down the alley, a rough hand grabbed her arm. She gasped as Hawkins's partner, Shorty, yanked her toward the darkness. "Boss wants a word," he hissed. She swung her purse hard. The weighted coins struck his temple, and he stumbled. But before she could run, Hawkins himself stepped out from behind a barrel, his face twisted with rage. "You and that fancy cowboy think you can humiliate me?" Eleanor backed away, heart pounding. "If you touch me again—" "What? You'll scream?" he grinned. "Ain't nobody gonna help you now." The hammer of a Colt clicked. "Wrong," said a voice behind him. Hawkins froze. Jack stood at the mouth of the alley, gun drawn, eyes cold as steel. "I told you," Jack said, "this was over." For a moment, no one breathed. Then Hawkins dropped his knife and raised his hands. "You can't watch her forever, Thornton. Sooner or later." "Later's not your problem," Jack said, stepping forward. "Now, get out of my sight before I forget I don't shoot cowards." The two men bolted into the night. Jack holstered his gun and turned to Eleanor. "You all right?" Her knees trembled. "How did you?" "Followed you from the saloon. Figured they'd try something stupid." Eleanor's throat tightened. "Why do you keep doing this?" Quote. Jack's expression softened. "Because I couldn't save the ones I lost. Maybe this is my way of trying again." She looked up at him, the lamplight catching the shadows in his face. "You can't keep carrying the past, Jack. It'll crush you." He smiled faintly. "Maybe, but tonight, I don't regret it." They stood there a long moment, the silence between them heavy with things neither dared say. When the wind rose, carrying the scent of coming rain, Jack offered his arm. "Let me see you safely back." Eleanor hesitated, then took it. His hand was warm, steady. For the first time since leaving Kansas City, she didn't feel entirely alone. The next morning, the gossip began. By noon, the whole town was whispering about the saloon girl who'd caught the attention of Jack Thornton. Some said she was his mistress. Others swore she was hiding a scandalous past. Eleanor tried to ignore it, but each stare, each muttered comment, chipped away at her fragile calm. 3 days later, the sky turned yellow-gray, heavy with sand and lightning. "Storm's coming," Jake announced. "Big one." "Close early." Jack appeared at the saloon door just as the wind began to howl. "Hotel's too close to the edge of town," he said. "Roof won't hold in this. Come with me. You'll ride out the storm at my ranch." Eleanor knew what it would look like, a woman alone with a man. Days, maybe weeks of whispers. But she also knew the hotel's roof leaked, even in gentle rain. "All right," she said quietly. They rode hard through the storm, the desert vanishing into a wall of red dust. Jack wrapped his coat around her, guiding the horse blind through the chaos, until the shapes of his barn and house appeared like ghosts in the storm. Inside, they shook off sand and exhaustion. Jack lit a lamp, revealing a simple home. Solid walls, stone fireplace, clean but bare. "You can take the bedroom," he said. "I'll stay here." Eleanor hesitated at the door, looking back at him. "Thank you," she said softly. "Don't thank me yet," he replied, half smiling. "Storm like this could keep us trapped for days." And it did. 4 long days of wind and silence, of small talk turning to confessions, of 2 broken souls finding understanding in shared scars. Jack told her about Mary, Thomas, and Sarah. Eleanor told him about William, the husband who'd gambled away everything and left her to face the ruin. When the storm finally broke, sunlight spilled across the valley, clean and gold. Jack saddled his horse for the ride back to town, but neither spoke much. That silence carried everything: gratitude, longing, fear. Back in Dry Creek, eyes followed them. Gossip would run wild again, but Eleanor didn't care anymore. She'd faced worse storms than words. Weeks later, trouble came again, this time from the past she'd tried to bury. Men from Kansas City, hunting her for the debts her husband left behind. Jack stood beside her when they came, and he didn't back down. The fight was hard and bloody, but when the dust cleared, they were both still standing. In the end, Eleanor found what she'd been searching for. Not safety, but someone who'd face the danger beside her. And Jack Thornton, the cowboy who'd ignored every woman on the street, finally found one worth stopping for. The desert wind whispered through the sage that evening as they stood on his porch, the sun sinking behind the hills. Jack took her hand, rough fingers brushing against hers. "You ever think how strange it is?" he said softly. "How one glance can change everything." Eleanor smiled, her gray eyes shining in the fading light. "Not strange," she whispered. "Just fate." Quote. And somewhere in the distance, the desert wind carried the sound of peace, the kind only 2 souls who'd found each other could understand.